All right, good morning, everyone. My name is David Arreila. I'm the hearing officer for San Francisco Public Works. Cerise Waders is the clerk of this hearing. The hearing is being recorded via Zoom and will be available afterwards through a link on the San Francisco Public Works website, sfpublicworks.org. As this is a virtual hearing, there is no sign-in sheet. So if you'd like to receive information about the result of this hearing, please send an email to the email address listed on the hearing notice. This public hearing is being held to consider 5 items: 207-129 for 1 Street 3 with replacement at 3618 22nd Street. The staff has denied the request and the applicant has appealed. Order number 207-158. This order supersedes order number 207-130. 2 street trees removal with replacement at 737 Buena Vista Avenue West. Staff has denied the application and the applicant has appealed. Then order number 207-131 for 1 street tree removal without replacement at 2800 or 2090 Buchanan Street. The staff has approved the removal and the public has protested. 207-132 for 3 Street 3 removal with replacement at 69 Green Street. Staff has approved the removal and public has protested. And finally, 207-133 removal of 2 street trees without replacement. I think it's without replacement. Let's see here. Just double checking. Without replacement at 2208 to 2212 25th Street. Staff has approved the removal and the public has protested. And now the hearing will proceed as follows. First, I will allow public comment. For the members of the public may address me on matters that are within the department's jurisdiction, but not on today's agenda. And then I will ask public works staff to speak first to present the case. Then I'll allow the property owner or representative to speak. Then any member of the public or witness who wish to speak. Each speaker will have up to 3 minutes to speak. The clerk will monitor the time for all speakers and will indicate when the speaker has 30 seconds left through a buzzing, a bell, basically. If you are a party to this proceeding, I will call on you to speak. If you would like to use visual materials in your presentation, please let us know before you speak so we can set that up. You will then have the standard 3 minutes to provide your comments. If you are a member of the public or witness who want to speak, wait for me to call for public comments, then use Zoom's raise your hand feature if you're on a computer to put yourself in the queue to speak. If you are dialing on your phone, dial *9 to indicate you're raising your hand. When it is your turn to speak, I will recognize you. If you're on your phone and you're muted, press *6 to unmute yourself. Comments and questions should be addressed to me only and not to the department or the applicant. If you cannot finish your comments within the allotted time, you may submit a written testimony to me at the SF Urban Forestry email address. Cerise, would you be so kind to provide that email address on the chat? If I feel that a question is warranted, I will ask the question. After all comments are completed, I will close the item. I will now begin the hearing. Can I have Public Works make his presentation, please?
Good morning. My name is Chris Buck. I'm the urban forester for San Francisco Public Works.
1 second,
And-
sorry. I think I think I think I'm opening up for comments first.
Okay.
My bad.
Okay. So we'll.
Please, would you?
Okay, we have
Public
a
comment.
hand for
Yes.
Diane Epstein Porter.
Trying to hunt down the chat. Oh, there you go.
Can you hear me, Diane? If so,
I
you'll need.
apologize. It was
there
on
you-
mute. Can you
there
hear
you-
me now?
Yes, we
I
can.
apologize. Thank you, everyone, for your time. I hope you're well with your families. Again, my name is Diane Epstein Porter. I am off today. I just want to say with my family, it is Yom Kippur. And I'll be honest, this is greatly important to my husband and kids and I. We normally would have been in at Temple. So to be honest, I am missing services. It's unfortunate. Again, we're appreciative that this meeting was scheduled on the morning of Yom Kippur. I'm fasting. And I just wanted to note that this is how important it is that we're actually skipping Temple. So I could attend. My husband had to be in the office, but I'm speaking for both of us. We have the honor of living with our two teens at 3618 22nd Street. Cindy Ng is the building owner and the manager of the building. She's wonderful, and it's a great honor living here. We love it. We love living in Noe Valley. We're speaking specifically regarding the potential tree removal. So
I'm sorry, Diane. This is David. It seems like you're speaking about the item per se, which we'll get to it in just a few minutes. This time is allotted for general public comments for DPW jurisdiction. What you call it, subjects, I guess, and not for the agenda itself.
So I apologize. This was not the time to raise my hand and speak specifically regarding the
not
tree.
quite. Not quite.
I see.
But
Okay.
if you had like a general question about like how the hearing is going to be conducted.
Oh, I see. I apologize. Okay.
No, it's okay.
I jumped ahead. Okay, I'll lower my hand. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay.
Next, public comment.
Yes, we have Josh. Go ahead.
Hey, Josh.
Yeah, hi, can you hear me?
I can hear you. Yes. Hi.
Well, just a couple of things. It looks like the chat is disabled, so if a chat is directed at any member of the public, they can't actually respond. And then the other thing is, sure, at some point I may have to flip over to attending this hearing by phone. I would just request that throughout the hearing, if possible, to give visual descriptions. That would be super helpful for anyone else who is on the phone, and also it's just helpful for anyone who may have visual impairments who may be attending. So if possible, to just be as visually descriptive, not over the top, obviously, but you know, just enough so that people can get an idea of what you may be talking about. If you say, as you can see by this photo here, or something like that. That's all. Thanks. Thank you.
Okay, good point. We'll do our best.
I have a question, Josh. Are you able to see that I wrote in the chat, so nobody is able to see anything I've written?
I saw that you sent me a message. Yes, but I couldn't respond.
But you, okay. Can you see the message itself though, or no?
Yes.
Oh,
I
can
can see it. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Sure.
Okay. And
Great.
then we have John. Go ahead, John Nolte.
Good morning.
Morning.
On my chat, I cannot see anything you sent into the chat. And then the other issue is that on the DPW's website for tree removals, I've noticed in the last month that you are posting for other departments on that website, and there's no address to who in those departments to appeal those trees that are posted. So we have multiple listings for last month, and there's no address to what department in each one of those departments on your website to protest the trees or even to discuss the trees with. It goes into a general thing on it on the bottom of the website. So I appreciate you having a contact person for each one of those postings. You had them in the past, and now for whatever reason they're not there. And I appreciate the work you're doing on posting those on the website. Thank you.
Thank
Mr.
you.
Nolte. Yes, I'm not actually that familiar on that mechanism. Perhaps Chris Buck from Urban Forestry will be able to address
Yes,
those
we'll
concerns.
get that information to the website manager as well.
Okay, that's
Thank you.
more appropriate. Thank you.
And then Michael Nolte.
Just want to iterate the chat function is not says chat disabled, so I'm not receiving anything on the chat. So
Okay.
I'll keep on talking until somebody disables or enables chat.
I don't work for Zoom, so unfortunately, I'm unable to fix that right now. We were having technical difficulties this morning, so we will let everyone know if there's something that needs to be said. So I have noted that the chat is disabled.
All right.
So okay, everyone. So it sounds
Thank
like what does work is this raising of the hand.
Yes.
So let's proceed as the chat is not available, and whenever you have something that you would like to share, do raise your hand, and we'll go through, the order. Let's do it that way. I will apologize. Obviously, this is not ideal, but kind of aside our hands. Okay. I believe we have one more. Is it Diane?
Yes, Diane, did you have something else, or was
No,
your?
I apologize. I just am raising my hand to be in the queue. So do you not want me, I'm unclear when you want me to
Okay.
do that.
Okay. So here's how it's gonna work. I'm gonna let the DPW present the case first, and then I will call on the property owner, which in this case is you or a representative. So you don't actually need to raise your hand preemptively, because I'm gonna call on you anyways. And then I'm gonna let public comment, and then it's actually the public members that are going to raise their hands, so they can, I can call them up. So you don't need to raise your hand at
Okay,
all. You can put
thank
it
you.
up.
I'm sorry, you
problem.
guys, to be clear, I'm not the owner. Cindy Ing is the owner of 3618 22nd Street. So I'm a tenant here. I believe I would be considered part of the public, correct?
You would.
Okay,
Excellent.
thank you.
Thank you for clearing that up. All right. Without further ado, let's get started. For again, order number 207-129, 133 with replacement at 3618 22nd Street. I have Mr. Buck make his presentation, please.
Sure, thank you. Good morning. My name is
Morning.
Chris. My name is Chris Buck, and I'm the urban forester for San Francisco Public Works. I work closely with our staff who are certified arborists. Their job title is urban forestry inspector. So we all take turns representing staff at our hearings, and I'm glad to be here this morning. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen in a moment. And what we typically do at these hearings is present a lot of visuals through PowerPoint, and it's a good point. We'll try to describe, what we're narrating to kind of help as much as possible create a impression and descriptions of what we do. So I'll go ahead and do that with this first item. I might also provide a little bit more info about a general approach by Bureau of Urban Forestry within the first case, and then you might hear me kind of repeating certain themes as we go through additional cases. So let me go ahead and share my screen now to pull up my PowerPoint, which will be here soon. Okay, just give me a moment to find this PowerPoint. Should be here. Share screen. There it is, PowerPoint from beginning. Okay, and Cerise, if you could just tell me this looks fine.
Yes, it does.
Great, okay. So again, just to provide a very brief overview is that Public Works is a city agency that has jurisdiction over all of the street trees within the public right-of-way, just kind of showing a photo of the Chinese elm trees here on Folsom Street, one of our greatest accomplishments, I think, in tree planting and management in San Francisco. And our goal is to ensure safe, clean, and green infrastructure in public right-of-way. Five and a half years ago, almost 6 years ago, the voters of San Francisco approved Prop E, which was turned into Street Tree SF, which is that Public Works is now responsible for maintaining all of the street trees, meaning if trees need to be pruned, replanted, and then at times removed, that's the responsibility of Public Works, relieving property owners of that responsibility. So I'm going to go ahead and move on to our first item this morning. So regarding Public Works Order 207129, this is a tree removal of one street tree with replacement adjacent to 3618 22nd Street. We received a tree removal application from the property owner, and after reviewing that application, the staff denied the request to remove the tree. The applicant, the property owner who submitted the removal application, appealed the staff denial. So the next couple of images, I'm going to show photos of the subject tree, which is a Monterey pine tree. The scientific or Latin name for that is Pinus radiata, native to Monterey. And the tree itself, I have a photo here of the tree. The tree is located in the sidewalk towards the curb, so it's considered a street tree within the public right-of-way. It's a tree that Public Works is actually responsible for maintaining. And Public Works now has a routine schedule of maintenance. Our goal is eventually to be on a 3 to 5 year maintenance cycle. And so this is a tree that Public Works is responsible for maintaining. That said, property owners are allowed to submit removal applications to have concerns addressed. And that's why we're here today, discussing the applicant's desire to remove and replace this tree. I'm looking at our staff information that they've provided for this. In their review of the application, they stated that the overall condition of the tree is good. That means the vigor of the tree, meaning how healthy are the leaves and the stems. What is the overall tree structure? Is it good, fair, or poor, or is it likely to fail as a potential safety issue? And our urban forestry inspector noted that there's a slight lean to the tree, but it's corrected. There's some dripping of sap, nothing too excessive or unusual. The tree is in overall good condition. There is tree root related sidewalk damage to the nearby sidewalk and infrastructure. The tree at this time does not pose a significant risk of damaging the actual physical property that the tree is adjacent to at this time. We're going to move on to another image of the subject tree. The image on the top right of the screen shows the proximity of the tree to the curb. This is a very steep street on 22nd Street, where at this point in the roadway, the sidewalk, there's actually a stairway of about 8 steps or so, and then another level landing for pedestrian entrance, and then the stairs continue up vertically up the hill again. So we have a street tree, a pine tree located in this kind of designated planting area within the public right-of-way. You can see in the bottom of the image, there's raised concrete that the tree roots are damaging. This is, from Public Works perspective, not enough of a reason to require removal of the tree. The image below also shows the pine cones. I know sometimes pine cones can fall and be a nuisance. That said, Monterey pine trees are known for retaining their pine cones literally for decades. So it's pretty rare for pine cones to drop, but that could be a bit of a nuisance to folks who are lucky enough to park regularly in front of the same place more than 1 day a week. So staff summary here, reading from the slide, is that the tree has been denied for removal since it's in relatively good condition. It's not a significant or urgent safety hazard or risk to damaging the physical property at this time. It's possible that the sidewalk damage may be repaired without the need to remove the tree. And no replacement plan was submitted by the applicant, which is something to know, and perhaps we'll hear from the applicant on what their thoughts around replacement would be. Replacement tree would be required as required of our code to be planted. One other thing I just want to note is that this is a side of the street where there's 90-degree or perpendicular parking directly adjacent to the property and the tree. And typically I see a lot more damage to street trees in this situation. But it looks like folks have been pretty respectful of this tree. And there might be some minor damage, but as you can see from this top image, very little damage that enters into this conversation in any way. So overall, to be consistent with how we handled similar cases, at the staff level, we contacted the owner and issued a denial of their request to remove the tree. Upon receiving that denial, the applicant appealed that denial and requested that this matter be considered at the hearing, which is now taking place today. So that concludes our staff presentation.
Thank you. Thank you. We shall proceed now to the property owner or representative. Should be in the audience, I believe. Yes. Cynthia N.
Yeah,
I can see
hi.
you. Hi.
Okay,
Can you hear
just-
me?
we can hear you, but give me just
Yes.
one moment. I'm going to promote her to panelist. She wants to be seen. And then I have her documents and will be presenting her documents as she speaks.
Understood. Thank you.
Okay, just one moment. Okay, Ms. Ng, you'll need to unmute yourself again.
How's that?
There you go. Yes. Okay, now we can hear you and see you. So what,
Okay, great.
are you ready? I will share the screen. What do you want me to show first?
Okay, why don't you just show a picture of the property from the up, pointing uphill. Should I go ahead and start while you're getting the photo?
Yeah, is it working?
I don't see any picture there.
I'm not sure.
Okay, yeah, that's one picture you could show.
Is it showing now? Okay.
Yeah, that's one of them.
Okay.
Okay,
We'll have 3 minutes and I'm gonna go ahead and start the timer and then you just tell me which pictures you want me to show.
okay. So my name is Cynthia Ng. I'm the landlord for the building where the tree is located. And we wish to have the tree removed for the following reasons. The tree is a fire hazard. On September 20th, there was a fire in our building where a plant located on the second floor balcony lit up. The fire department came, put out the fire, and one of the branches of the tree, which was protruding onto our building, caught on fire as well. The Monterey tree is considered flammable, and if there is a fire at our property, it will add fuel to the fire because of the proximity of the tree branches, etc., that are touching our building. The hearing off, the urban forester mentioned this before, but we also have damage on our driveway and the tenants are having right now difficulty in entering and exiting the building. They have to maneuver their car a certain way to avoid the big hump in order to avoid scratching their car. The next thing I wanted to mention is it's a tripping liability for the city. Our locksmith who was working on our building recently fell when he stepped on the tree's pine needles, which are in between the cars. That's where you had seen in the previous picture that I circled. And yes, that's a good picture of the pine needles. And they slipped. Some pedestrians have slipped on those steps, and then the contractor slipped and fell on the pine needles there. And I wanted to mention, because we have a steep hill, there is no street cleaning on our hill. The next thing is that another tenant was walking down the building on the steps, and the pine needles fall on the steps and slipped as well. We've witnessed, or someone has witnessed that. The tree is overgrown and is not really maintained. I put in tickets for 311 to come and trim back the branches which are touching our building, and nobody has come back for that. And also there's been branches that are hovering over the parked cars, and no one has come to trim that as well. So
30 seconds.
So, okay, I guess what you can do is just briefly just show some of the pictures that I sent you. Yeah, so that's uphill. That shows trees branch touching.
That's the end of the pictures. The other two items were letters.
Oh, okay. And then we did have written documentation from one of our tenants, as well as the person that fell recently,
That's the time.
entering and exiting the car.
Okay, and those have been submitted to the hearing officer already
Yeah.
as well.
Yeah, I did show a picture of the fire truck that came on the 20th. I don't know if you have that picture available.
I don't. Oh, there it is.
Oh, there
Yes,
it is. Yeah, see, here's to show proof that the fire department did come to, and there were 5 fire trucks that showed up, by the way.
Thank you, Ms. Ng.
Thank you, Ms. Hai. And just a clarification, you may have said this before. Did you say that the fire started within the building, or it started first on the tree and then it spread to the building? Which
It
way
actually started on a plant on the balcony, and then the fire touched the branch that was protruding onto the balcony.
Understood. All right, thank you. Let's move on to a public comment, please. Yeah, well, Josh first, I think.
Thanks. Can you hear me?
Yes.
So for the members of the public that are listening, a little San Francisco Urban Canopy 101. Our city has the smallest urban tree canopy of any major city in the US, hovering at around 13%. By contrast, LA has around 20, New York has around 25. So when it comes to poor tree canopy, we're number 1. The good news is we have an urban forest plan to increase our street trees by 50,000 by 2034. The bad news is that since we rolled that out in 2014, we've actually been failing it, and our canopy has decreased since that plan, not increased. And yet, despite our dwindling urban canopy and failing climate and ecosystem and increasing urban heat islands, this past fiscal year, our city allocated $0 to public works to plant new trees. So even though a tree is supposed to be replaced within 180 days, good luck to the city in managing that. So when I see a healthy tree on the chopping block, especially one that is native like this one is, and that doesn't have pine canker and is actually supporting our native ecosystem, it actually hurts my heart and my stomach. Regarding the root upheaval, it does not actually look to be disrupting access to the public right away. And I would agree with the department that this is no reason to remove the tree. Also, when you consider that our streets are full of feces and needles and trash, pine cones are literally probably the least of our street nuisances and perhaps even the best nuisance we could encounter during a walk along a neighborhood street. Regarding pine needles, we have leaves and needles on my street, which is why I sweep it. I sweep our sidewalk. Regarding cars getting scratched, I am fairly certain that our 13% tree canopy isn't the main reason that cars get damaged in this city. Regarding a fire hazard, like every single tree in the world is flammable. As a matter of fact, the reason I might have to switch over to phone later in this hearing is because I'm up in the mountains doing wildfire work. And under this theory of fire hazard, I suppose this forest that once existed should have just been cut down so it wouldn't burn sometime in the future. Anyway, for all those reasons, I would just respectfully request that this department stick to its decision and deny this requested removal permit. Our canopy cannot continue to sustain losses that are avoidable. Thank you.
Thank you. So following up, I have a question for Mr. Buck for Uber Forestry. If you could please refresh my mind about sidewalk maintenance, both as it pertains to these pine needles, making the steps slippery, as well as broken up concrete. The tree is in the care of the city. So where does the maintenance fall on? And also, since we're talking about that, our landlord has mentioned these 311 calls for maintenance, but has not received maintenance yet. I'm not sure the time period, but if this is seen as an issue, either safety or just plain maintenance, when does a owner, landlord, can expect this maintenance to be carried out? So I'm sorry, that is a lot of questions. Maybe we should just start in order. Who maintains the sidewalk if the tree is city-owned?
Sure. Thank you, hearing officer. This is Chris Buck with Public Works speaking. So the city is responsible for what we refer to as major maintenance, which is pruning of a tree, planting a tree, repairing the sidewalk, the concrete, but we're not responsible for what we refer to as minor maintenance. So believe it or not, we spell out that things like sweeping or basic cleaning maintenance, accumulation of needles on the stairs or sidewalk would be the responsibility of the property owner. And it's just something that's expected of everyone. I mean, a lot of people have issues with litter and garbage. As one member of the public mentioned, I have a bag of garbage every week where I live because the driveway goes into my basement. So yeah, sweeping, I go to the dump once a month for all the garbage that I pick up every day. So minor maintenance, the property owner needs to sweep that up. Addressing the needles. I wrote all the notes down, so perhaps I could just keep going on some of these points.
Sure.
Yeah. So the other one was regarding sidewalk repair. Again, that is something that the city would be responsible for, but I do want to note that the code also said that any damage that existed prior to July 1st, 2017, both public works can't repair all the sidewalk overnight. And so legally, there's going to be a joint, we're going to be arm in arm with the property owner defending any potential trip and falls if the damage was existing and clearly visible prior to July 1st, 2017. That said, the city is responsible for making those repairs eventually. And regarding the 311 calls, we review them all the time. But again, if it's just not a public safety concern, 311 is, it's a call center. We're reviewing thousands of those a year. We do get out and review them. Folks may not always hear back from us. It does not mean that because you call, we come out a week later to prune a tree, especially a tree that's healthy like this and doesn't have any major maintenance needs. So We have a very specific pruning schedule. This area of the city, there's a lot of street trees in this neighborhood. So I'd assume that we've probably already been out there to prune the tree and it's just waiting for its next cycle. We probably have about 40% of the city still waiting to receive their first round of maintenance. But it's something we can verify with you as the hearing officer is where they are on the schedule so that it could be part of your considerations. And then lastly, I do think that I didn't provide photos of damage to the entrance of the driveway curb return regarding the vehicles being able to come in and out of the driveway. That to me was perhaps the biggest issue here that again, I will look at and provide you photos of because I didn't provide photos of that in our presentation. And that, I think that
is there maintenance plan, is it public?
it is. I'm not a great like on the spot multitasker. Otherwise I'd pull it right up on our screen, but it's on our website. So if you go to sfdpw.org or Google San Francisco Public Works trees, we have a tree maintenance schedule where we actually have a map of all the trees, most of the trees in the city, where property owners and any interested folks can, click into their neighborhood and see when they're scheduled for maintenance. So that's something I can provide to you and the applicant following the hearing.
Okay, and thank you. And then in the interest probably of all the other orders as well, I'm gonna ask this question. Obviously, dealing with the entire city of trees and sidewalks, it takes time. I get that, urban forest doesn't have unlimited funding. It makes sense to me. However, say that a landlord has a specific need, a specific issue that the landlord feels is, or owner feels is, urgent. So maybe he doesn't want to wait or cannot wait. Maybe he has, 5 tenants that are upset about this specific issue. What can they do? Understanding that DPW is supposed to get to it eventually, but they feel the need to remediate immediately. Can they hire a contractor, maybe ask for a permit to fix the problem, and then maybe get a refund or some kind of credits? How would that work? Same thing for maintenance. Say that you have this tenant has a tree in their window, right? So the issue is imminent. Maybe it's gonna break, so they have to deal with it before it becomes a bigger issue. I understand people can't just go there and just straight up cut the tree or cut the branches indiscriminately. But is there a process where they can hire certified arborists that then will submit a permit and deal with the tree and then maybe get a refund or a tax bill or something like that? Is there something like that? A
Sure.
mechanism that is available to the owner?
Sure, this is Chris Buck speaking with Public Works. We have had property owners, a common request is when someone's performing maintenance on their building, like replacing a roof or painting a house, and they ask if they're on a schedule for maintenance. Those are cases where we can't get out individually to do, one-off maintenance that works with that timing. Those are scenarios where we do have a process where an owner could hire a private contractor that we vet and we meet with on site to review scope of work and provide an email allowing permission to perform a certain amount of maintenance on a tree. We are not able to provide reimbursement for that. And then we do again go and review trees to rule out pressing public safety concerns. And for example, if we have a report of damaged sidewalk at Geary and Van Ness, a really heavily traveled pedestrian area, that's going to get prioritized, over a street that's on a block that doesn't have as much heavy pedestrian traffic, even though there's reports of people slipping. It's not the sheer volume that we're dealing with in other locations. So that's a little bit of background on how we prioritize these requests. We need to be strategic and systematic. So we would not be able to reimburse for that work, but it is something that we can meet on site to review in greater detail with the property owner, just to look at what some of those options might look like. So that's a little bit more feedback about that.
All right, thank you. I believe we have one more member of the public, John Nolte. It was waiting to be heard. So let's go on to him, please.
Yes, good morning. Since this, again, this is a Monterey pine, which is a native to the Bay Area, I would shoot, and since Buff has thoroughly vetted the decision to keep the tree at its location, even though any tree has some issues with it. So there's not enough problems with this current tree to warrant the removal, and I would commend the work that Chris has done and his team on this specific tree to keep it there and work with the property owner with any other issues as they go forward, and when this tree is maybe on the pruning cycle for that area. Thank you very much for having the hearing on this tree today.
Thank you. And unfortunately, he's saying that since you're the property owner, the rebuttals are not allowed in the form of this hearing. But perhaps we had a Diane Porter that wished to speak earlier, so maybe she can not speak on your behalf. But I believe we can call her up.
Okay, thank you so much. Can you hear me?
Yes. Hi.
Thank you, everyone, for your time. Diane Epstein Porter. I'll be as brief as I can. I second everything that Cindy said. Forgive me again, it's Yom Kippur. I haven't eaten since sundown. And as a mother, I'm a bit taken aback, respectfully. You all are very, very casual. Our building almost burnt down, okay? I love trees as much as you do, I promise. I'm very active as an adult, a working mom, to ensure Cindy has said we could potentially replant with other beautiful plants, flowers, trees. But you're all very casual, okay? And the mother in me is coming out. If it wasn't for a blessed tenant upstairs, I was in my son's room, the whole building would have been up in smoke. So forgive me if the casualness and the history of the tree, I understand. Okay, but to be schooled about what's important and about your heart hurting. Okay, talk about my heart hurting. We almost burnt down in this building. No one has mentioned this tree has it just completely overgrown for the space. The branches are now intruding on fellow tenants' balconies, and the whole thing would have exploded. And I am struck how casual, and that, thank God, the heroes, the firefighters came and what was doing on this street, and it's completely overlooked, and to be told to get out there and sweep up the pine needles where I have seen firsthand people slip on the pine needles. I am, by the way, I'm a working parent. My husband is a veteran. He's worked at the VA for over 10 years now. So we don't have to be schooled on what is important in life. We are raising our children with very solid values. I am out there. Cindy can attest to this. My husband, my kids, with gloves in between raising my kids and working, picking up trash constantly on our beloved street, beloved Noe Valley and city. Okay, I don't need to be told to get out there and simply sweep up pine needles, that's our job, which I do anyway. Okay, but this is a fire hazard, it's a liability. And with Cindy's permission, please, some of you should come. My husband does the driving. Okay, we've worked very hard, by the way, to be told. I'm sorry that we're quote lucky or
30
fortunate.
seconds.
Thank you. To be able to park in the same space every week, we've worked very, very hard to be able to remain in this city and to raise our children here. It is a liability what my poor husband has to go through backing out of this driveway every single day with our kids in tow. This is also a danger, as well as the fellow tenants who park in the internal garage. You guys should try that. What my husband has to maneuver and the fellow tenants, you're very casual about the dangers that this tree is imposing. I've seen people trip. We've literally had a fire and the 2 trees would have ignited, or they did ignite if it wasn't for the quick thinking. The damage to the car, none of these things matter. I understand the significance of the tree, but at what point is human life more important than a tree? I appreciate what you all do very much. I'm very active at work. I'm part of climate change and a lot of environmental initiatives. I promise I am. Okay, but at what
Thank you,
point
Mrs.
is
Porter.
human
I mean,
life
I'm
more
sorry
important
to
than
interrupt,
this
but
tree?
we are
Thank you.
over time at this point. Thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. All right. Let's see, we have the, thank you for that. Don't have any more members of the public. Ms. Porter, you can lower your hand. And don't have any more questions about this item in particular, so I will move on to the next item, 207158. We should understand the supersedes.
Mr. Rayla,
Yes.
Michael Nolte had his hand up. It keeps flashing. I'm not certain if he's
Oh,
actually
I
trying
didn't
to
see
or
it.
not. It comes on and then it goes off. I'm not sure if that's a what happened to
Why
him.
don't you try promoting him
Oh,
and
let's see.
unmuting him and see if.
Can you hear me, Mr. Nolte?
Yeah, this is Michael Nolte.
Yes.
A couple issues. One is the transcript stopped transcribing at 10:05. I'm not sure if that's not just on my end or is that also on everybody else's end, and that's recording this, another way this meeting's supposed to be recorded. Also, as far as this particular agenda item, I've heard both sides of the issue. Obviously, this is a tree hearing. It's not a slip and fall hearing. If there are problems with the slip and fall and somebody wants to address that with the city, that's a different kind of hearing. As far as the fire people coming out to address a fire as it happens, the tree was not at fault. It was again, I'm hearing a lot of management issues in this hearing, and the management is partly responsible for the sidewalk. The management is also responsible for what goes on the balconies. And if there are issues like that occurring, then these are management issues or should be addressed to the management or the property owner. I am sympathetic with some of the issues I've heard, but this is a tree hearing, and whether or not the tree has issues that need to be addressed as far as its maintenance. The only thing I've heard so far is that it needs trimming, and that will be done in the future by Buff. And I've heard the second issue of the sidewalk needs to be repaired, whether that's a joint issue between the property owner and Public Works, or it's an issue of just Public Works at this point. I'm not clear, but that seems to be something that'll be worked out also. So I think all the issues have been addressed in this hearing, and I would like to see the pine tree stay because it's a native to California, and therefore it's a rare thing to see that we have native trees still here. Many of the trees that we do have planted by citizens of San Francisco are not native and take up a lot more water, and we're dealing with a drought. So that's all my comments.
All right, thank you very much. that wraps up the public comment phase. And now we shall move on to the next order, 207158. Have Mr. Buck make his presentation, please.
Yes, thank you. This is Chris Buck with Public Works, urban forester within the Bureau of Urban Forestry. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. With a little luck, we'll pull up where I last left off. Yeah. Okay. Let me advance this. There we go. Thank you. So this next item is for Public Works Order 207130. It's to consider the removal of 2 street trees with replacement adjacent to 737 Buena Vista Avenue, Ave West. And Cerise, can we just confirm that the PowerPoint is up at full screen?
Yes, it is.
Thank you. So we received an application for the removal, and at the staff level, we denied the request for removal and the applicant appealed. This next image on PowerPoint is showing tree number 1. We labeled the trees with the flow of traffic on that side of the block for consistency. So this would be the downhill tree of the 2 that are adjacent to the property. These are street trees within the right of way. Both trees are the same species. It's red flowering gum. The scientific Latin name is Corymbia physofolia. And this application was reviewed by Daniel Hoffman, one of our urban forestry inspectors, who's also a certified arborist. Overall, on this tree, of the 2 trees, this tree has the more kind of healthy, vigorous looking foliage to the tree. It has a very large trunk, but very few secondary branches. So considering how large this trunk is, the overall canopy size is rather kind of limited by comparison. That said, I do want to point out that just in general, a member of the public mentioned this, and we want to reiterate, of course, that in San Francisco and at Public Works, within our urban forest plan, it's recognized that larger mature trees provide greater range of benefits to both the environmental, social, and economic health of the city. And so larger trees provide greater benefits. So you'll hear this a lot this morning, but when we allow a tree to be removed and replaced, the replacement tree may take 20, 30, 40 years to regain the loss of canopy. And so we really are vigilant about which trees we're allowing to remove. That is the underpinning of our review of whenever a tree removal is contemplated by Public Works or an applicant. That is what we are weighing this against. So the deficiencies there aren't a lot of deficiencies with this tree. There's some stakes that are still in place, but they're not really impacting the tree at this point. The tree, as I said, has been extensively pruned over the years, and that's greatly reduced the risk of any branch breakage or failure. Moving on to the next tree, this is the uphill tree. We refer to it as tree number 2. You can see in this image, this canopy is more sparse. It's not as dense. It's less vigorous. I would say tree 1 had canopy vigor that was good, and this canopy vigor would be fair. This tree is taller and rangier, meaning it's a little thinner, less canopy between all of the branches. That said, we really do try to retain trees as long as they're still relatively healthy, because again, there's a lot of benefits these trees are providing. The most obvious is carbon sequestration, and the city has declared a climate emergency, and it does boil down to the actual street trees we have in the public right of way. Regarding our staff evaluation of this tree, the deficiencies, as I stated, looking at the photo, there's overall reduced vigor. So there is some stress that this tree is facing. There are 2 co-dominant stems, meaning 2 upright stems of similar sizes, which can be a problem because when trees fail, They often fail within structural points in a tree that you can spot as potentially weak. The main union between these two stems is relatively strong, however. Overall, our staff wrote that while the tree condition is not stressed, the tree could recover and still provide benefits to the community, meaning there is some signs of stress. The tree has recently been pruned by Public Works to reduce risk of failure. So these trees have been pruned as part of our first round of street tree SF maintenance. Our staff on this screen, I'm showing tree number 1 and tree number 2, which is technically tree number 5 in our database. Both the arborist report that was submitted as part of the application, the arborist report recommended removal due to branches that have potential to fail. Our staff comment is that the tree has been pruned by Public Works to reduce risk of failure. The applicant arborist report stated the tree is cracking the sidewalk. The staff comment in response is that the sidewalk damage is not high risk and can be repaired without removal of the tree. For the second uphill tree, the arborist report recommended removal, again, due to branches with potential to fail. The staff response is that the tree has been pruned recently to reduce that risk of failure. Reason for removal, again, in the second tree is damaging the sidewalk. Staff response is that the sidewalk damage is not a high risk and can be repaired without removal of the tree. One of the things we often do when we repair sidewalk is to open and expand the size of the tree basin, the opening where the tree grows, and that can reduce the amount of future damage as well and reduce impacts to tree roots. So overall, the Bureau of Urban Forestry feels that the arborist recommendation of removal would be too proactive removal from our policy standpoint. The tree risk has been reduced by pruning the trees, and the trees still provide benefits to the community. So overall, the trees do not meet our criteria for removal at this time. We denied the request to remove the trees, and the applicant has appealed. I did want to also talk a little bit more about, there's a permit history here. There was an original permit, tree removal permit from 2018, permit number 781189, that allowed the removal of 6 significant trees on private property that were within 10 feet of the right of way. This image I'm showing now shows the tree as it existed in August of 2017, showing a number of significant trees that were all approved for removal. And there was a replanting condition on the permit. And so the original permit here in 2018 that was issued is 4 trees can be replanted in the existing basins. 2 additional trees will be planted in the significant tree zone on a private property. This next image shows that 2 trees, potential future significant trees circled in red, is showing that the 2 future significant trees have been replanted as required of the permit. However, it appears that only 2 replacements were planted. No replacement trees have been planted in the public right of way as of yet. And so that's something that, in preparation for the hearing, our urban forestry inspector has been in touch with the applicant to review the prior conditions in 2018 that were placed on that permit to remove the trees. We did receive follow-up response in the last several days, and I did just forward this to the hearing officer. There includes an updated plan, but my recommendation at this point in time to you as the hearing officer, Mr. Rayla, is that the urban forestry inspector review the replacement tree plan to site verify if it can be carried out as shown on the plan. So I do want to acknowledge that we received a follow-up plan in response to our questions that they received, and that we are still in the process of triple checking physically on site if the trees they propose for replacement can be planted. So at the staff level, we see this application. We don't feel it's compelling to remove the 2 additional street trees at this time. And we do have some unfinished business regarding the permit that was issued in 2018. That said, we hope to confirm for you in the next few days what the follow-up plan submitted in the last day or two, how much of that is likely to be allowable. I do want to note there's a electrical utility vault that had been placed in the public right-of-way following the issuing of that permit. And so it just looks like we're going to lose a planting site. If that is the case, then we'll need to assess an in lieu fee for the permanent loss of the planting site. So these are some of the additional details that staff is currently working out, and we will get back to you in the next day or two with that information so that you could include that in any of your potential findings or recommendation. But just to reiterate, we received a request to remove 2 trees. At the staff level, we're denying that request and working with the applicant to follow through on the previous conditions of the permit that was issued in 2018 that was construction related. Thank you.
Thank you. May I have a property owner representative next, please?
Can I be able to share my screen, please?
Sure, give me just one moment and I'll promote you to panelist, and then you'll come in and unmute yourself once again.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Hello, hearing officer Rayla. Justin Zucker from Reuben Junius and Rose on behalf of the owner applicant. I appreciate Diane's comment and wish all observing an easy fast today. The applicant seeks permission to remove 2 overgrown street trees with replacement and planting of 3 new street trees required for the loss of on-site significant trees from a renovation project at the property that, after some COVID delays, has completed. With the home renovation complete and chance for accidental damage to trees gone, the applicant now seeks to plant new street trees. The home renovation project resulted in the loss of 6 significant trees, as Chris mentioned, with the requirement to plant new street trees in the 4 existing empty street tree basins. An underground PG&E utility vault, right here, has been located where one of the empty basins was, preventing the ability to plant a street tree in that location. An in lieu fee will be paid for that tree if it can't be planted upon issuance of invoice from DBI on behalf of Buff. The 2 street trees in issue are in poor condition and a dangerous condition, warranting the removal and replacement. Roots for both trees are actively cracking the surrounding concrete, causing uplifting of the sidewalk, creating a trip hazard for pedestrians, especially for the elderly, such as those at the Buena Vista Manor up the street. The arborist found one of the trees has a large branch protruding well outside the canopy over the sidewalk. While I note this tree was, this limb appears to have been trimmed recently, the other tree's canopy is thinning, indicating decline, and has a large co-dominant leader that still remains directly overhanging parked cars, with a high potential for failure due to the tree's low vitality and concentration of end weight on this leader. It's noted for the other tree that limb failure is at a high risk, given that there is active limb breakage occurring in the tree, furthering the risk to persons and property below. As noted by Chris, these trees show signs of stress. These limbs could fall and fall, which can be exacerbated by drought, such as the one we are in, causing injury to pedestrians and or damage to property. Significant trimming of these trees could result in their shock, and such excessive trimming by the city could result in their demise without a corresponding commitment to replace, which, as noted by Josh, without any funding is the likely outcome. In addition, the existing sidewalk is uplifting, is proposed to be replaced, which will increase pedestrian safety. While the sidewalk replacement doesn't call for significant excavation, some must be done to create a level sidewalk. The existing trees have overgrown root and significant root systems near the ground surface. As such, some of the root system will be damaged and may cause shock to the trees. Coupled together, all the structural and character deficiencies of the subject trees along with potential shock from root damage and pruning, warrant their removal. Accordingly, applicant respectfully requests the Buff's order be overturned, allowing removal of the subject trees and replacement with the most mature olive trees possible that are adequately sized and better suited to the site constraints and are not anticipated to impact the sidewalk while creating a cohesive streetscape. Thank you. I and the landscape design team are available for any questions.
Thank you very much for that presentation. Let's move on to the public comment. Do we have anybody? Nolte first.
Good morning. A couple of issues that I have seen that distress me. Number one, the agenda states that there are 3 trees on the agenda, and I just verified that. So that has to be corrected, and also there might also be reason for this hearing, not being posted correctly on the agenda, stating there are 3 trees at this location being heard today and only 2 being discussed. Now, next issue is the cracks that the lawyers brought up are on the opposite side toward the curb. People don't walk toward the curb unless they are walking out of a car. So therefore, if the sidewalk cracks are toward the curb, therefore it's not in the sidewalk that people normally walk between the tree and the property because the street trees are next to the curb. So the slip and fall is not an issue for this, shouldn't be an issue. And then the next issue Buff already brought up was that the Buff had trimmed these 2 trees, so therefore they have been trimmed. And so they didn't, I don't know when their next cycle is, so that's between them and the property owner. Lastly, hearing that this was heard in 2018, which is probably a hearing that I attended, and now they're hearing that not all those trees that were supposed to be removed and put placed back in were not done so, and also stated in the diagrams by Buff, there's supposed to be room for 5 street trees because they're numbered through 1 through 5 on front of this property. And even though there might be utility vaults going in, you still have room for 4. So, and again, there are something going on with the spacing on the sidewalk that even though you might be losing one for utility vault, there's still 2 trees missing. And plus, I'm not clear about how many trees that were supposed to be planted for significant trees on the property if they followed the ruling that they had in 2018. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Nolte. 1 second, Evan. All right. So I missed, is that Josh or Michael Nolte, which is next? I'm not sure which one is first.
It will be Josh.
Okay, Josh.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Sorry, I did indeed have to flip over to my phone, so sorry about that. I may have missed some conversation, so if anything I say is redundant or doesn't make sense following some conversation, it's because I disappeared for a minute. So just a quick note that this is, to anyone on this call, it's a public process, not a personal one, and certainly no one is coming after anyone personally or judging them or their lives or what concerns them. So a lot of us don't come to one tree hearing, we come to just about everyone, and that's why we've been fighting for the whole of our urban canopy. From a procedural standpoint, and maybe this was explained, but it just doesn't make sense to me how any additional application for removal could even be considered without compliance with the previous permit. I know that COVID mucked up a lot of things, but it sounds like that permit preceded COVID by at least 2 years. So we've had 4 years to achieve that compliance. And in my humble opinion, as a member of the public, that should automatically disqualify this application. Not to mention, it seems like there should be some type of repercussion for failure to comply with that city permit requirement. Trip hazards, I know that that's already been discussed in terms of who's responsible for the public rights of way. And then right before I cut out, there was discussion about an underground utility vault. And just back in 2000, I think 16 or 17, my very first tree removal objection was on that basis. And what I learned in that process is that there's really no one who's double checking PG&E's assertions about where vaults need to go or don't need to go, or how many vaults need to go in and why. And just to put a cap on that objection, what I learned was that it wasn't actually the case in that first tree removal objection that I made back in 2017, that it wasn't actually the case that a vault had to go in exactly at that spot and that a big healthy tree had to come out. And because that wasn't actually the case, that tree is still standing today. So just kind of noting that there doesn't seem to be any check on what PG&E says is the only place a vault can go. So anyway, for all those reasons, I would just respectfully request that this denial be upheld, and that we continue to have as many large stature trees as possible in our city's basically shrinking urban canopy as we face climate change. Thank you.
Thank you. Moving on to Michael Nolte.
Hello, I'm Michael Nolte. Since the property owner has engaged a arborist, I would like to see the arborist consider adding more significant trees onto the property as a way to balance some of the issues that have been just pointed out, that some of the trees have not been dealt with since the 2018 permits were issued. I think instead of penalties being lodged, that the property owner can take on some more responsibility for the urban canopy in San Francisco. And since they've already lost one tree because of a thing into the sidewalk for a vault by PG&E, we've already lost one tree that's nearby their property. So, and as far as when somebody I kind of shudder when somebody starts talking to me about senior disabled people. I happen to be a senior person, and I'm disabled. I walk with a cane. And so, you know, we do look at the sidewalk. I mean, if you're from San Francisco, you have to look at the sidewalk all the time, because we do have a lot of uneven sidewalks. That's just part of being in San Francisco in a big city. So when somebody starts telling me I'm going to trip and fall, well, it's partly the person's fault when they trip and fall. It's also the part of what's going on in the environment, but it's a combination of the two. And I just don't, you know, I appreciate somebody saying that, you know, they want to address those concerns, but then it's also the concern of the property owner. They can at any time fix the sidewalks in front of their property if they want to incur the cost. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that could still be done. Property owners still have the right to fix their adjacent to their property any trip hazards. So I would like to see as many trees put in either on the property or adjacent to the property onto the sidewalk that is possible, because this is what being in this part of the city
30 seconds
for is have a beautification neighborhood. So thank you. That's
Thank
my
you, Mr.
comment.
Nolte. Do we have anybody else from the public? I believe not.
I don't
All
see
right,
any other hands.
let's move on to next item then, 207131 for 1 street tree removal without replacement. Around the Buchanan Street, 8090. Staff has approved the removal and the public has protested. Can I have Buck, Mr. Buck, make a representation, please?
Thank you. Good morning. This is Chris Buck, Urban Forester with San Francisco Public Works, and I'll move the PowerPoint on to the next slide. I'm learning that it just takes a moment to do that. There we go. So we received, this is regarding the removal, as you stated, for one street tree without replacement adjacent to 2800 Buchanan Street. Staff approved the removal and the public protested. So we'll go into the details on what the subject tree is, what the site is all about, and our staff decision to approve it. So the subject tree is a Lombardy poplar. The Latin scientific name is Populus nigra italica. It's a very tall, fast-growing tree. The species that we see here, if you visualize the center of Washington Square Park in North Beach, there's a statue of Ben Franklin surrounded by 7 or so Lombardy poplars. That's the species that we're looking at today. So it's very much a vertical tree, fast-growing, and we'll talk a little bit more about the tree. So what this image is showing, the subject tree is on the left of the 2 trees in the image. There's a streetlight pole and utility pole that the streetlight's attached to. And the base of the trunk is about 6 feet away from the base of the streetlight pole. The tree has a lean, slightly downhill, and the main upper stems of the tree are within just a foot or so of that streetlight bulb. So we've got an obvious conflict here. We are approached by PG&E. In most cases, they approach us proactively, well before planned maintenance, to talk about their concerns. Utility poles do need to be maintained, so there are times when there are conflicts, and there are times when the poles were there first and the trees came later, but we still try to work with those site conditions. So overall, I'm going to review the information provided by our urban forestry inspector, Daniel Hoffman. We have here on the left of the screen the list of deficiencies. There's previous topping cuts, fairly typical treatment of the species because of the lean and the nature of the conflict with the street light and the pole. The notes here is that 30% of the tree straining and rubbing against the utility pole includes some scaffold limbs pushing on the utility pole, the guy wire, and accessory attachments. The tree was pruned in September during our posting period by PG&E for maintenance equipment. That was something they gave us a heads up about. Also, the tree requires frequent maintenance to maintain it off of the pole and away from the street light. So again, it's a very fast growing tree, very large stature, very vertical, but also sprouts out quite a bit. So we have a director's order that outlines ideal and required tree spacing between trees and utilities within the public right of way. So typically a species that's medium to large stature, we would not want to plant within 15 to 21 feet of a street light. In this case, the tree is just about 6 feet away, and what we're seeing now, 20 to 30 years later, are all the repercussions around the wrong tree being planted in the wrong place. We're recommending removal because more than 25% of the crown would be required for clearance from the utility pole, the PG&E equipment, and the street light. There's a marginal amount of tree canopy left at this point after the most recent pruning. Here's another image that just shows a view from the sidewalk looking straight up at where some of the previous pruning cuts have been made. The tree will continue to sprout from these pruning cuts and require frequent maintenance to keep the leaves and the branches off of the pole and equipment. We talk about removal and replacement of trees when they're no longer sustainable. And even though the vigor of this tree is not in question, the overall condition of the tree at this point to us has become unsustainable. We would much rather put money into trees that will do much better longer term than provide repeated visits that become unsustainable for us as a city. Just showing another example of the conditions. We were out on site in 2017, so we've certainly been out to the site a number of times, showing how much this tree sprouts out, how quickly it sprouts out to cover the streetlight pole and contact the utility pole again. The continued pruning will increase potential for decay. This species, poplar or populus, does not compartmentalize decay well. And so it's known as a pretty fast, when it comes to decay, it's considered to be fast. Decay spreads fast, relatively speaking, within the tree compared to other species. And any pruning cut is ultimately a wound to the tree that must compartmentalize. Showing a couple more photos showing the tree located in the sidewalk. There's been some damage to the sidewalk, but that's not really part of the narrative here. It's really more about the conflict with the pole and the street light. I also wanted to reiterate again, urban forestry inspector, we're just repeating similar themes, but we have another screen to show. Buff at the staff level approved the removal of the tree because of the required frequent maintenance to maintain clearance. The tree was previously topped. We did receive one letter of protest during the public notification period. The tree cannot be replanted in the same site due to clearances required from the tree in the streetlight. And we did look for a replacement location, the closest reasonable planting location. The good news is we found a viable spot at 2840 Buchanan. This image shows this is just a few properties downhill from the subject tree, wide open, wide sidewalk with no street trees present. And so the replacement tree associated with this, if approved, would be planted at 2840 to 2842 Buchanan. This diagram shows the subject tree on the uphill side and how downhill of this tree, about 4 sites below, there is room for a replacement tree to be planted that will be better suited to the site and not have a conflict with the street light or that utility pole. So our decision at the staff level was to approve the tree for removal with replacement in this downhill location. We have been receiving more funding for planting, and we're in the process of shaping up those planting plans for the current fiscal year. So I do anticipate that trees removed this year will be replanted. We're going to be off the mark on the 120-day requirement, but we are going to be working hard to meet that goal. So some good news regarding planting funding, but we really need to get it up and running. And we do acknowledge that over the years, we've been not able to meet those planting goals. That concludes the staff presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry, are we on the correct order? Are we already gone on Buchanan?
Yes.
I think
Yes.
I'm having a moment. Okay.
Yes.
My bad. Okay, great. Let's see if the owner or representative is in attendance. And let's have him speak next, please.
I think in this case, the removal was initiated by Public Works. And so in this case, we won't have an applicant to hear from for this item.
Oh, I see.
So this was, yeah,
I
this was, to be clear, it was initiated by Public Works and the public protested.
Oh, okay. Well, this is one of those rare cases where DPW take initiative to deal with the tree, right? With a removal.
Well, correct. Not as rare as some of our advocates would like to see, but yes, this was initiated by Public Works. And even though PG&E is involved, this is not a tree we're requiring them to deal with, as it's really an issue with our tree. So it's not an applicant scenario.
Right.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So in this case, the if the owner was the owner of the adjacent property or fronting property was in attendance, it will be part of the public considered.
Correct. It
yeah,
might be
yeah,
nice to
okay.
hear if they're here, nice to hear from them in any particular order.
Okay, so again, remind me how did DPW first learn about this tree?
Sure. Yeah, sure. So Public Works was contacted by PG&E
Okay, gotcha.
about,
Okay.
so yeah, they had approached us about planned maintenance. And in those conversations, of course, the preference is to maintain, to prune,
Understood.
work around the existing tree. In most cases, we're pleased to say that sometimes we can, we find that a tree is easily can be retained and worked around. Never know what we're going to find until we get out there. But in this particular case, it just seems like a pretty obvious conflict for us.
Understood. Thank you.
Sure.
Let's move on to the public comment then. Is there anybody? Right, Josh? Josh first.
Thanks. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, since this is out of order with Public Works key map grid, it sounds like this is more of a PG&E initiated than a city, since it's not, it seems to be taken out of turn with the key map grid. I would request that whatever happens, if there is a replacement, that the permit clearly state that, because as it is on the agenda, it looks like it's without replacement. But based on the department's presentation, it sounds like that is not the case. And I do think that is really important, because we are not, according to a June 2021 report by the city's Budget and Legislative Analyst Office, Public Works is not even keeping up with replanting at the rate of removal. And that was even before the funding got slashed to basically nothing. So I admire Chris's optimism. The numbers seem to tell a very, very, very different story, that we're not only not keeping up with removal, but we're certainly not growing our urban canopy. So at a minimum, the order should say that this is with replacement. And then I would just note, in terms of the 15 to 21 foot distance that was mentioned, there really are like tons of examples all over the city how that is just not the case, including larger stature trees like Brisbane boxes all up and down Valencia. So, you know, if we're going to start creating those precedents, that could have some dire consequences down the road. And then speaking of precedent, there is actually a precedent by ironically, the SFMTA on their Folsom Street project for keeping a tree that was very close to a street light. As a matter of fact, a ficus. And in that instance, the hearing officer actually required to just put in a lower street light. Such a concept to have larger statured trees and lower statured street lights, so that we can have lighting and safety and tree canopy. And that would be a wonderful thing to see become more of the rule and not the exception in a city like ours, where we are struggling so mightily for places to put larger statured trees, you know, and maintain our standards of public safety. So that's my comment. Thank you.
Mr. Rayla, you were muted.
Sorry. Thank you for that, Josh. Moving on to John Nolte next.
Yes, morning. Couple of things. Again, talking about the Folsom Street replacement tree. The hearing officer walked and looked at all the trees that were being removed. I don't know if the hearing officer for DPW does or just looks at the notes. So, you know, because I mean, during this presentation, Chris made a point that the tree was trimmed in September. So obviously any of the pictures that are being shown right here, that was a week ago. So, or last month. And the dates of those pictures that were shown were not within the last month. So that tree would look differently, right, than it is what was presented to the public today. So, and then the next issue is the conflicting here, going with PG&E topping the tree and Buff sitting by. So and also since it's PG&E's dealing with the high voltage lines about on that street. It questions to again how much topping that tree could take. But if this is going to be approved to be removed, I would suggest a bigger stature tree, not using Prop K money, which is 600 trees that are possibly going to be used, and that's probably what and the city supervisors have weighed in on that when it was discussed twice in the SFMTA. So and they were concerned about how those trees are where they're being planted and so forth. And so I would want a large stature tree put in, if it's going to be moved down the block in replacement, and not a little 8 gallon or 10 gallon. I want a 24 box tree, sizable to what's there, comparable to the replacement of the tree. Because again, we need something to replace the ecosystem of the tree that you're removing, the biomass to it. So I think all should be added to the consideration of the decision on this tree. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Is there anybody else from the public wishing to speak on this item? Don't see anybody. I will close this item. Oh, yeah, I will close this item and move on to the.
Mr. Rayla.
Yes,
Mr. Buck has his hand up.
Oh, I believe we didn't allow for rebuttals.
No, Chris Buck, Mr. Buck, the staff rep, has his hand up.
Oh, okay. Yes, please.
Thank you. Yeah, staff doesn't provide rebuttal typically, but in the physical hearing setting, if I hear something and I think it's helpful to correct something that's said publicly, we did show photos of the tree in September. So I just wanted to clarify. I heard the feedback from Mr. Nolte regarding photos that were shown, and I do want to assure him that one of those photos, actually many of those photos, show it as it appears now. So I just wanted to clarify for the public that we're there physically and we had accurate photos. That's all, just clarifying that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Buck. All right, that's then. Let's do move on to the final item. Actually, before we do that, real quick, Mr. Buck, I also do have on my agenda that the previous item, it was slated for without replacement. But here it seems like we are gonna propose a replacement after all. Would you please clarify which way it is?
Thank you. And I heard that feedback from Mr. Clip from the public, and it's a really great point. So we had a policy change this year. We've always required replacements physically adjacent to the immediate property. We want the immediate resident who lives there to understand, like, is the tree going back right there? Yes or no? I think absolutely. I hear the feedback, and I think what Public Works should really start doing is removal with replacement adjacent to you know, downhill property at 2840, no room to replace directly adjacent to property. I think we can have it all. I think it's really great feedback, and we are still very stuck in the kind of the terminology that we've been using for years when we prepare these for hearings. But I think it behooves Public Works to be very clear about that. We can explain it. There's no reason we can't add a sentence and say, no room for replacement directly adjacent to property. Proposed replacement is adjacent to 2840 Buchanan. So that is noted. And I do want to note that if we had stated something would be replaced and then it's not, that would be probably reason for redoing, the hearing announcement. But in this case, we're not over promising and under delivering. So from that perspective, I feel like we're okay. Feedback's received, and we can work on that for sure. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. That's great. Last time, I will move on to the last hearing item now. 207133, removal of 2 street trees without. Yes?
There are 2 items. The next item is Green Street 207132.
Oh, yes. Yeah, okay, right. Okay, now I understand why I was out of work. Apologies. 207132, removal of 3 street trees with replacement at 69 Green Street. Staff has approved the removal and public has protested. Mr. Buck, the floor is yours.
Thank you. This is Chris Buck, Urban Forester with San Francisco Public Works, Bureau of Urban Forestry. I'm going to go back to our slide and sharing that. And then it should just take me a moment to get the PowerPoint to respond to my arrow key. So hold on a moment. Let's see, Cerise, it should be ready in just a moment.
It's showing.
Yeah, it's showing the last slide from the previous case, right?
Yes, but I see your Green Street on the side.
Yes.
Next
Let me.
slide, yeah.
Okay,
There
here
we
we go. Thank you. Sorry about that delay. So this is to consider the removal of 3 street trees with replacement adjacent to 69 Green Street. Staff approved the removal and the public protested. This is also tree removal permit application number 792483. The 3 subject trees are all ficus trees, Ficus, Microcarpa, nitida. I'll go through staff reasoning behind our staff level approval. So the species we talk a lot about in San Francisco because there's so many of them citywide. We had a number of failures, and a number of years ago, we had to recognize that some of these ficus trees that exist in the public right-of-way never received solid structural tree pruning. This has left them susceptible to a lot of large stem failures. And so these 3 trees that we'll show photos of, they're not the biggest ficus trees we have in the city, but they all do have very weak, poorly attached structure that's prone to fail. And I just wanted to kind of say up front, that's a primary reason for our approval of the 3 trees for removal. And so this tree 1, again, looking at photo tree, ficus tree 1 of 3 that front the property. The property has a brick facade. You can see in the image, tree 1 is on the far right as you face the property from the street. So the deficiencies found by our certified arborist, our urban forestry inspector, is poor branch attachments and structure. There's some wounding from vehicle strikes noted. The tree protection grate, the vertical protection grate around the trunk of the tree is causing some damage and girdling of the tree. That in and of itself, not a reason for removal, but again, we're just noting conditions that are observed on this tree. The tree does pose a risk of stem failure. The root flare of the tree is being girdled also due to the tree grate that sits within the tree's basin. So the base of the trunk of the tree is being girdled. Noted also here by our inspector evaluating the application is that work on the adjacent property states that it cannot be completed without significant pruning or removal of the tree. Obviously, that can always be up for debate depending on the nature of what's proposed. And then it says the tree to be replaced with would be Afrocarpus 24-inch box size tree. This next image shows tree 1 and girdling of the root crown, the base of the tree within the tree basin. This next image shows tree 2, also with codominant stems of similar size and narrow angles of attachment, which make them prone to fail and split apart. So the deficiencies are pretty much identical to tree number 1. The urban forestry inspector also noted some sidewalk damage. Again, we're not saying that's the reason for removal. It's just noted as overall site condition. Vertical tree guards, which we never recommend be used anymore. These vertical tree enclosures end up damaging the tree more than they do protect them. We really heavily discourage their use and prevent it in most cases. And this is a great example why, because they remain on the tree too long and cause damage. Again, we have potential failure risks with the weakly attached branches.
A quick question, Mr. Buck.
Sure.
If an owner were to recognize that restriction, say, would it be able to just remove it?
Yes.
Without penalty?
Yes, the owner could remove anytime, remove anything that is ideally call us first so that we can verify what they're doing is reasonable. But that's true, and it's everyone always intends to remove these grates or guards. I think the misunderstanding is that people believe that they were there to be decorative, but they were really there to protect the young tree when it was tiny. And the moment it got large enough to withstand pedestrian vandalism, they should have been removed.
Do we have some kind of detail for a preferred approved protection?
Yeah, we do. Yeah, we have a lot.
Okay.
Yeah, we do. We have a lot of material about that. And the good news is this is now uniformly recognized by many in the quote unquote industry is not being ideal. These were probably placed around this tree maybe 30 years ago.
Understood. Thank you.
Yep.
Please continue.
Yeah, and this just shows tree number 2. It shows the ground, the sidewalk area. You can see there's some brick patterning in the path of travel. But I just want to bring the attention to the fact that you have a tree that goes up about 7 feet or so, one trunk of the tree, and it just divides into 2 stems. And you can see some bulging out on the sides between those 2 stems. And that's where we typically see failures within ficus trees. This is tree 3, it says tree number 2, tree site 3, showing also a ficus tree with codominant stems, narrow angles of attachment that are prone to fail, a tree grate or guard that's causing damage to the trunk and girdling the base of the tree's root crown. Similar findings by our arborist in terms of reasons for approving the tree for removal. This one's an extreme example of what happens when you leave a vertical protective quote unquote grate in place, is that the tree will literally subsume it and grow around it. What that does though is it causes openings for decay to begin setting in. This in and of itself would not be reason for removing a tree. It's noted though that it exists. The image below this shows damage to a stem over the tree, significant damage over the tree from a lack of clearance, but it also shows a large wound where these 2 stems join. And so this is a very weak point within this tree that's prone to failing, where you can see this darker vertical seam between these two stems. And so we did approve the trees for removal based on their condition, how we know these trees perform as a species when they have not been structurally pruned. We did receive a letter of protest during the posting period. And again, we should have an applicant or representative to speak to their additional reasonings for removal. I do want to just be clear that we don't approve trees for removal based on necessarily construction related activities for trees in the public right of way. We really want to keep our arborist hats on and just evaluate condition of trees and less so construction related reasons for removal. If these were 3 trees in reasonable condition, our decision making here would be a denial, because we're not here to evaluate whatever construction may be taking place. So I just wanted to point that out. There's one exception, which are garage and driveway curb cuts, but I don't believe that's the nature of this particular request. So I just wanted to point that out. Our reasons for approval are based on tree health, not whatever work is taking place on site. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, let's have owner representative next. I'm not sure which one is it. Let's see if Mr. Nicholas or.
Hello? I don't know. I think
Yes.
I'm unmuted. My name is Greg Giacchino, and I am a board member of the Telegraph Hill Dwellers. I also have an office that is a block and a half, and I can see the site from my window. I walk by here every day, or those trees every day, and I see no reason to remove these trees other than a developer.
I'm sorry, Greg. Let me stop you right there for a second. I was asking if there is the owner or representative.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't.
Yeah.
I'm speaking out of
I wasn't.
Sorry
I
about
just
that.
wasn't sure if you
That
were
is-
one or the other. So,
But I'll
sorry.
tell you what, I have another meeting that's coming up, so if you could let me say my piece, I would appreciate it. If we can take this out of order if
Kind of have
possible.
to go. We kind of have to go in order. I apologize.
All right.
Perhaps it will be quick. Nicholas, are you the owner or a representative?
Yeah, I'm representing the owner in this case.
Great.
Do I have the ability to share my screen?
Yes.
I join this panel.
All right. I do see a screen. Is that yes? It's Nicholas' screen. Okay. If you're, let me know when you're ready.
Hi, everyone. I'm Nicholas Matson. I'm representing the owner on behalf of this tree removal hearing. Chris, thank you for your presentation. I think it's important to state that this decision was made not on behalf of the construction-related activity going behind, but the risk the tree does pose at the current moment. Chris kind of went over that in detail, so I will be going over some kind of extra curriculars that are going on as to why we believe this tree is a perfect candidate for removal. As we've seen in this meeting and stated, it's a ficus, which the city's kind of, come to terms with the fact that maybe as they age, they're not the best. The SF Public Works website itself acknowledges that they're vulnerable to failure and are beginning to outweigh the benefits they provided. Roots of ficus trees can cause severe damage to sidewalks, making them buckle and create tripping hazards, which we've seen in the case of all 3 of these trees. It's kind of already been stated in this meeting that alone is not a ground for removal of the trees, but this is just in addition to the risk that we've identified the tree poses. DPW DPW order number 183151 has special criteria for removing ficus trees. These trees meet the following criteria within that order. Large limbs damaged by vehicles, which Chris identified. I have photo evidence that I'll be scrolling through as I get through this kind of wall of text here. And then also the large stature of the trees themselves. I saw the slide stated that they were 40 feet tall. I believe they may be a little taller than that. Our building is 45 feet tall, and the trees are definitely taller than the building itself. And within that DPW order, it states that if the tree is taller than 50 feet, even if other criteria are not met, the approval may be granted based on size. And then I kind of state here that the exact height of the tree is not known, but they are taller than our 45-foot tall building. We also have some criteria for new tree planting. This doesn't necessarily pertain to existing trees, but it is something to take in consideration. The trees are currently planted more than 3 feet from parking meters, and the basin is constructed with a tree grate and has the vertical supports we saw one of the trees growing into. These are no longer suggested. And given the fact that we are replanting with a new suitable tree, it's a perfect time for us to maybe, adjust adjust the location of the trees in order to meet the new criteria here. I kind of have some evidence of what we're looking at. We've already stated that they're ficus trees. I have the verbiage here from the website identifying ficus trees as more of a nuisance at this point. And we have here within the DPW ordinance, how far from parking meters the trees are supposed to be located and what the basin is supposed to be constructed of. The existing trees as they are clearly in defiance of that. Go down here, I kind of point out the locations. We see examples of numerous damage by vehicles in the past. Kind of see that here more up close. And then we had some pictures before that showed that, but you can see these trees have repeatedly been battered by vehicles in the past and are healing. Just more photos there. This is our photo of it growing into the vertical grate there. And then this is the DPW order, which I'm not going to read through. Overall, I do want to say that we are taking the sensitivities that we are replanting new trees in this location. So it's not as if we're just tearing down trees for the sake of tearing down some trees. We really do care about the safety of everyone around us and are actually looking forward to having some new trees that are better fit for the property.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Let's move on to the Giacchino, Mr. Giacchino.
Yes. So anyway, I've got 3 minutes before I've got to run, but so this is I introduced myself, but I have been in this neighborhood for 18 years, a block and a half away, and there are ficus trees all around across the street, around the next block. But other than that, the blocks from where that location is to the end of Green Street have very few trees. So taking these mature trees that match the ones across the street don't really make sense, given that they aren't sick, they don't particularly pose a hazard. They could be trimmed. But what this appears to be, in walking by the site every single day and looking inside, they've gutted the whole building. So it's a developer who wants to take the trees out, put some new ones in, clear the space in front of the building to make it more, in their mind, attractive as they're doing something to the facade. And it doesn't make any sense to remove healthy trees that pretty much are healthy for the desires of a developer. That's my 2 cents. There's some other people that are probably online that can probably back me up on all of this. So thanks for letting me talk.
My apologies, I was muted. I muted myself. Let's move on to Josh, please.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, I appreciate the department's note that trees are only evaluated for their health and not because something is construction related. I do find that a little confusing because at the tree removal hearing just last week, dozens of trees were approved by the department for removal because of the UCSF construction, even though the department presented all of those trees as being perfectly healthy. So it just seems a little contradictory from the public's perspective. Regarding girdling, I just want to note that Public Works years ago had initially proposed that as a reason for removal for several large trees located at 2nd and Folsom. But after some pushback, mostly by a guy named Josh, the city agreed that perhaps the trees could make a comeback if that girdling was removed. The girdling was removed, the trees are fine, and we didn't lose all those large statured trees on a single city block. So just moving into kind of what I think is the meat of my protest here is that, in 2017, the voters approved Prop E, which is now Street Tree SF. And this did two things. Number one, it gave responsibility for street trees back to Public Works. And number two, it set aside $19 to $20 million tax dollars annually to perform street tree maintenance. And the street tree maintenance is basically based off of an audit that was performed by an outside contractor in 2015, 16. And that was also paid for by $250,000 of taxpayer money to evaluate the health and viability of every single street tree in our city. And this audit, I presume, would have included things like a long-standing girdling of trees, and that certainly would have factored into its assessment of the viability and future of that tree. Based on that audit that was performed by the outside contractor, the department developed this key map grid. And the point of this map is to help the department prioritize which trees need the most attention first, or as the department I think has said in the past, worst first. And to the best of my knowledge, this key map grid has already been applied in District 3, which is where these trees exist. And the trees at issue today were not proposed for removal at that time, despite their girdling or any other health issues brought up today. So it seems to me that the only reason these trees are evaluated now out of turn is because of this building owner or developer prompted it.
30 seconds.
That really wasn't made clear in the presentation either by the department or by the property owner. So it would seem that Public Works is taking these trees out of turn, which to the member of the public looks like a developer or property owner getting favoritism for their requested tree removals that over trees that may actually need it, according to the city's own key map grid. So for those reasons, I would respectfully object to this proposed removal. Thank you.
Mr. Rayla, you're muted again.
Sorry, I am doing this on the phone, so I'm like switching between different screens, and I'm like.
That's okay.
I said I was saying thank you, Josh, and let's move on to Mr. Carnes. Let me try to remember this time. I'm muting myself.
Okay, can you hear me okay? Hello? Yes.
Yes, yes.
So I went online and pulled the file on these trees from the DPW site. And I found Mr. Nicholas Matson's article there, his presentation. He's apparently with Novo Construction Incorporated. He appended a 15-page argument for removing street trees. And I've been in the business only for 3 years, whereas Josh has been in this for many more. But the arguments he presented were like boilerplate. I don't know where he got them, but we've all seen these over and over again. His article starts off with, in order to accommodate installation of the sloped curtain wall system, and then he goes on to say the trees should be removed. I'm wondering, is Mr. Nicholas Matson an arborist? And why did he have to tie removing 3 trees to his construction project? I don't know what a sloped curtain wall system is, but I did go online and look at it, but it doesn't say you have to remove a tree to put it in. So a couple of things that came up earlier, I'd like to repeat. At 737 Buena Vista, Mr. Buck stated that we try to keep trees for CO2 sequestration. I think that, you know, the same thing should apply here. This is, these trees aren't in anybody's face. And the last pruning on these trees, according to the tree map, was 2018. And since the city's on a 3 to 5 year maintenance cycle, the trees will be pruned anyway, probably this year or the next. And another thing I like to just point out to everybody that earlier on, they tried to get the contractor on the line, and they said, who's the owner of the trees? Well, just so everybody knows, these street trees are owned by every resident of San Francisco. They're not owned by the contractor at 69 Green Street. So I would definitely oppose this and recommend that we do
30
something
seconds.
else. Yeah. Also, just so you know, District 3 has a history of ficus trees. Way I got into this thing was in 2019. 7 ficus trees in front of Washington Square Park were posted for removal. And over the next, several months, we negotiated with Buff and with, got our people involved, and we managed to save 4 of the 7 and get an additional 8 magnolias planted nearby. So I hope you can do something like that. Do not remove 3 trees. Thank you.
Mr. Rayla, you're muted. But were you calling on Mr. Nolte, or what were you saying? Okay.
Yes, I was calling on Mr. John Nolte.
Okay.
I need a shortcut on this device. There probably is. Need to find out. Sorry, Mr. Nolte. Please do go ahead.
Okay. Good afternoon. So, as been stated on by several of the public, that this was triggered by the development of the property, and also that the and the permit only talks about this is just to help with the lighting situation inside the building. Well, that's the real reason what we're dealing with here. You're taking out shade trees because they're giving nice shade to the building. A new property owner bought the building and now is renovating the building, and it's been stated it's gutted the building. And in the pictures that we saw the one of the toilets, portable toilets are outside the building. So that means right now the developer is already developing the property, and now the hearing is coming because the developer wants to proceed with the rest of his development of this parcel. So I too have been following meetings on ficus trees. I actually have a petition online with thousands of signatures to save ficus trees, and the city only did a thing on ficus trees. But if you hear about when we do have a storm, they talk about 200 trees were damaged during a storm. Well, they weren't all ficus trees. I would like to see the numbers of when we have these storms of other, because ficus is one of the top 10 planted in the city. How about the other top 10 in order that are being damaged? And ficus it only gets the bad rap. So with an order, but I'm sure there are other orders for other trees, or if there isn't, there should be. So there's no reason for these trees to be removed for the purpose of a developer plan, and they could be trimmed if there happens to be some issue that, as was stated, that there will be at some point with buff. So we saved many ficus trees, and there was experimental trimming done to them, most of them, so that they would stay. So that is
30
an
seconds.
alternative to the plan to remove. Thank you very much.
Unmute Mr. Rayla.
Thank you, John. Let's hear from Michael. Just a point of a personal curiosity. You two related?
Yes, we are. We are identical twin brothers.
Okay.
Native San Franciscans, 5th generation San Franciscans. And we have similar interests about keeping San Francisco the way our great grandparents tried to make it.
Clearly. Thank you.
So,
Thank you for satisfying this personal curiosity. Just
that's
wondering.
I was actually an examiner about the ficus trees that were in Washington Square, and so I was actually quoted, and my picture was added into the Examiner. So I have an actual interest in this part of the city also. As being a native San Franciscan, we have interests throughout the whole city, not just one neighborhood that we might live in, because throughout our life, I'm over 60 years old, and I've lived in various parts of San Francisco, and I think that when I see a developer come along and basically wants to improve their property, that's fine. But they also have to remember that San Francisco has a long history, and you're now going to be part of a part of the city that you have to respect, and you have to address the concerns also of the community. I'm not sure how much outreach the property owner has done to the community. I've heard somebody from the neighborhood association speak, and nearby residents have spoken so far in this hearing. And I think that there need to be some mitigation measures done to keep the trees in. I haven't heard any real reason to remove the trees. So that would be my preference for these 3 trees that are being discussed, the street trees. And I'd also I'd like to claim the ownership, saying that I'm a co-owner of these trees. If I'm going to be a member of the public, that also makes me a co-owner, and I like that title. I'll use that from now on when I speak. Say I'm a co-owner of these trees, and I like to keep them there. So thank you for reminding that we are co-owners, and we have a right to speak on the keeping our trees, as many as possible in San Francisco, because they have a rights, and we like to keep those rights since they can't speak for us. So thank you. And that's the end of my comments.
Thank you very much. Right, that is all for the public for this item. Let's move on to the remaining item, 207133, remove for 2 street trees without replacement on 25th Street. Staff has approved the removal and public has protested. Mr. Buck, please.
Thank you. This is Chris Buck, with urban forester with San Francisco Public Works, Bureau of Urban Forestry. And I'm learning that just lags for a sec. So I'll start on the presentation while the PowerPoint kind of catches up with me. So this will be the final case for this morning's hearings, and I appreciate everyone's time on this hearing. I know it's been a good conversation. So with that, our final item is almost in front of us. Let's move the PowerPoint here. Yeah, here we go. Okay. Thank you. So final item is removal of 2 street trees, one with replacement and one without replacement, adjacent to 2212 25th Street. Staff at the Bureau approved the removals and the public protested during the public notification process. The two subject trees, one is a Monterey pine, which is on the uphill side of the property or to the right as you view it from the street. The other subject tree that we'll talk about is a yucca, and that is on the left side of the property. Both trees are set back off of the paved developed sidewalk, but they're still within the public right of way. The public right of way adjacent to this property is 22 feet wide. And what that means is when we think of street trees or the public right of way, the image that many may have is just of the sidewalks as they were poured and developed years ago. But that's not the actual property line, not always. In some cases it is. And so whenever we review trees and look at applications, we always pull up the parcel maps for each site to verify the jurisdiction over trees. So in this particular case, we measure 22 feet from the face of the curb where it meets the road and measure back towards the property, and that's where the property line is. So that's a little bit about our process. And so you'll see in a lot of these photos, these trees are back of sidewalk, meaning they're not placed in the sidewalk at the curb. So tree number one is a Monterey pine, Pinus radiata, and our staff approved this tree for removal based on a number of factors. One is the damage to the retaining wall that's occurring to the property. The overall condition is fair. The vigor in some of these photos you'll see, it does look green, for the most part, but there are a couple of sections that are beginning to show some signs of stress or decline, possibly from canker. Both trees are actively damaging the retaining wall, and to be consistent with other permit, staff approved the removals based on the property damage. The property owner submitted a letter of intent to repair the retaining wall because we certainly don't want to remove trees or approve removal of trees and not have stated concerns go unaddressed. So that's something that's been reviewed by staff. This next image shows the structure of the Monterey pine tree, just showing a little bit of decline. Our arborist who evaluated the application also noted that not every tree has perfect structure. We don't expect it to, but some species can tolerate it better than others. I do think Monterey pine can tolerate some atypical structure. So again, we're really approving based on damage to property. Just noting here, though, that the main stem or leader of the tree becomes this sort of elbow-shaped leader to the left, as shown in red. The trunk itself is within 2 feet of the retaining wall edge, and the scaffold branch with a sharp bend acts as the main leader. This is another view of the pine tree on the uphill side, viewing downhill. Shows the proximity of the tree within the setback, again, within the public right of way, but off of the sidewalk above a raised retaining wall and soil that's above the sidewalk grade. And again, the trunk of the tree is within 2 feet of the retaining wall edge. Here's a closer look at the site and the sidewalk. There are 2 existing street trees adjacent to the property. So we have these trees in the public right of way in what appears to be a front yard, but is really public right of way. And it also has 2 trees in the sidewalk adjacent to the property. But this image shows the retaining wall with a severe tilt into the physical sidewalk area and is actively crumbling and breaking apart in some sections. There's also some sidewalk damage as well. You can see damage to several squares here in the sidewalk. Here's another image just showing the posting notice on near the base of the tree so that the public can see which tree we're referring to. And this shows the damage to the retaining wall as well. It also shows the water line coming out of the soil and down in the center of the image and connects to the water meter box. Here's a view uphill, just showing again damage to the low retaining wall. Our certified arborist who evaluated this site, in preparation for this hearing, I found that there's actually a number of utility conflicts which I need to show on my final screen here tonight. Sorry, this afternoon, but they had noted that perhaps a small replacement tree could be planted in the area that's back of sidewalk. We're not requiring 2 total replacement trees because there's not sufficient space. But there are two existing curbside trees already. But I do want to call attention to that sewer trap that's in the bottom foreground of this image, and that'll become relevant in my final slide. This next image shows the Monterey pine again on the, that's the large tree to the right, the 2 street trees that are not up for removal that are in the sidewalk that'll remain. The next tree that we're going to be talking about is the Yucca tree. This is the second tree proposed for removal, and it's shown here damaging the low retaining wall at the back of sidewalk. And this Yucca, our staff thought it was perhaps Yucca gloriosa, Spanish dagger is the common name. I actually think it may be the Yucca elephantypes, which can grow to have an enormous base. And so clearly the trunk of this tree is damaging the retaining wall. But if I'm the property owner on the left in this image, I would be greatly concerned about damage to that property as well. I think soil above grade against the side of this house, this structure, certainly is not a good thing. And I can imagine the property owner has concerns about damage to the neighbor's wall. So both trees are actively damaging the retaining wall. This one, in addition, is actually damaging the structure to the neighbor's house. Now I say damaging, I'm just assuming whenever you hold an object up against the side of a wall, that's gonna create condensation and there's not gonna be airflow, and it's gonna hasten decay and damage to the property. Again, I'm not a structural engineer, but looking at these images, you can see where you'd be concerned about that. And I did, in preparation for the hearing, I actually wanted to show what a yucca can grow to be like. This is Yucca elephantypes. The base of a yucca can get rather large. And so I just wanted to show this image. This is an image showing a yucca at 60 Ramona Avenue, and just showing it occupying a nearly 6x8 basin. So to have this tree against the neighboring property, it's going to cause damage. And so I wanted to show the image, what this species is genetically programmed to grow as. So both trees are damaging the retaining wall. And one of the images I wanted to show, and I'll describe it as best I can, but on the uphill side of the property, directly adjacent to the Monterey pine tree in the area of sidewalk that don't have trees planted, there's actually 2 sewer laterals. There are 2 so the 2 sewer laterals are in brown, just to be show what those are. The 2 vaults here outlined in blue are water line vaults, meters, and highlighted in yellow circles are gas lines. So I just did this kind of, often we show a photo like this and we expect the public to understand what we mean by utility conflict. In this particular case, our staff was theorizing that perhaps a tree could be planted, 1 replacement tree in the setback area. And I think clearly that would have to go on the left side of this image, the downhill side, because the uphill side has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 utility conflicts. So I just wanted to show this and explain that we look really, really closely at sites. And so that's why we stated on this hearing notice that it's proposed removal of 2 trees. They're within the public right of way. Technically, they're street trees that Public Works would maintain. This owner has applied to remove them due to property damage. We think it's reasonable to allow the property owner to remove these 2 trees. In terms of what they have room to replant with, I think there's room for 1 replacement at back of sidewalk on the downhill side. That concludes the staff presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. May I have the property owner or representative next, please? Is he or her in attendance?
I don't see any hands at this time. Oh, there is a hand from Remy
Remy, yes.
Hummer.
Hello, good afternoon. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Good afternoon.
My name is Remy Hummer. I'm with Arborist Now, the private entity representing the property management company and owner of the property. I was the one that applied for the tree removal permit. Other than that, I don't really have much to add. I think Chris Buck's findings are accurate.
Great. Thank you. Thank you for that. Just want to make sure if you had any additional comments. Since that's not the case, so let's move on to the public comment phase. Josh first.
Yeah, thanks. Can you hear me?
Yes.
All right. Yeah, I was just looking at this tree on the San Francisco street tree map that's available on the Public Works website. And it looks like it was last pruned in October of 2021, and that it has a trunk size of 23 inches in diameter. And so just a couple observations based on the information from the city's street tree map is this tree was maintained by the city a year ago. And it's hard to understand how within a year it could have gone to, you know, we've maintained it and we've moved on to this tree is in such bad shape, we need to take it down. It's just, again, layperson, I'm not an arborist. It's just looking at this information that I find confusing. And then the second point is that is really just from an ecological perspective that we've got a native tree here that has a 23-inch diameter, and that is those 23 inches of diameter aren't just 23 inches of oh God, what's going to fall on our cars or something like that. It's 23 inches of carbon sequestration, of ecosystem support, you know, of all of this contribution to our city's environmental and ecological health that we are just going to take out without considering what it would actually take to put that back in. Just putting in, you know, a little 1.5 inch sapling, we're hurting ourselves with that. And it would, I am so excited for the day, and I hope it happens in my lifetime, that this city looks at replacement not as a 1-for-1, because taking out a 23-inch Monterey pine and putting in a 1.5 inch sapling, that's just a number. That's not a true replacement value. We need to be looking at the value. So getting back to what I was saying, I hope that in my lifetime, this city changes the way it looks at replacement from a simple numbers game to the actual environmental and ecological contributions that the tree is making in real time to our climate, to our city, which is failing from an environmental perspective. So, and I would love to see if the applicant and the city have that conversation and perhaps begin to move the dial in that direction in this instance. Thank you.
Thank you. John Nolte.
Yeah, so good afternoon. I see that, you know, across the street, plenty of room for more trees. So, you know, hearing that you can't place the one tree in front of the possibly subject property, but you have plenty of room within the surrounding area to put in more trees if you want. And so that it was not discussed. And so since it was made clear that Buffalo usually looks at surrounding area to plant another tree, that could be done in this location. But also I am a little concerned about two very mature trees that have been there probably for 20 years plus. And now because the retaining wall, at least on one, is crumbling a little bit. Well, that's a minor thing, I think. So that one should probably stay. But then the other one next to the other property, well, you know, I didn't hear the property owner for that adjacent property talk. So I guess he's okay with it, or she. So it raises a lot of questions here when one property owner takes out a permit, but you don't hear the second property owner that's being possibly affected, as Chris Buck applied in his presentation. I question the whole permit process because you're not including all the parties. So, and also since these are, I'm a little confused why you're calling these street trees when actually I would assume they would probably fall on significant trees because they are not really, you know, they're behind a retaining wall. So therefore these would probably be considered significant trees. But then, you know, I'm not going to have that conversation either because you're deciding it's a street tree or a significant tree. It doesn't really matter. These both are large 20+ inch wide trunks, and you want to take them out, or actually the property owner wants to take them out, and without significant reason to do so. That's a retaining wall. Well, you know, what's a retaining? You know, a guard in front of the building. I mean, you know, geez, the property owner waited how many years?
30 seconds.
To decide to fix the retaining wall, and also it was already stated that last year you went through the pruning of the trees. So I think they should stay. Thank you.
Thank you. I have one more, Mr. McDonald. Oh, actually two. No, just one. Let me see here. Two. Which one is first? Sorry, is it Mr. McDonald? Or
Will
Mr.
McDonald,
Okay.
go ahead. You should be able to speak.
Hi there, can you hear me?
Yes, we
Yes.
can.
Hi, I'm actually the downhill neighbor for 2212 25th Street. So just to the previous comment, we actually raised this to the property owner, the condition of the retaining wall and the concern that we had along our property line. And so while I do agree with the need to take it out to, you know, stabilize that retaining wall, and for me, for my own peace of mind, the structure of the garage with the trees leaning against, I'm in favor of, but I absolutely agree with Josh's comment around, you know, taking these trees out isn't, you know, a one-for-one replacement wouldn't do it justice. So if there is, you know, another location on the street or a nearby location that we could find a replacement, I'd be all in favor for. But yeah, there are definitely concerns on our side of just the structural integrity of the garage and the nature of the Yucca Tree and its impact that it is currently having on our property and on the sidewalk. So I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Interesting. Thank you. And finally, Mr. Michael Nolte.
As a native San Franciscan, I want to point out why people live in certain neighborhoods. They live in certain neighborhoods because, certain neighborhoods actually have better quality of life because of the trees and fewer cars, less pollution. And so, when you start looking at when a property owner decides to take away some of the reasons why there's a quality of life issue going on, which these trees actually provide, which is trees provide less noise, it reduces noise, helps with the pollution, and deals with the beautification and the quality of life. So here you have two large trees that have been around for a number of years, both being told, the public's being told that they both are could be a loss to the community. And again, I'll use my new title as co-owners of these trees in a weird way, since since Buff is saying that these are street trees and not on the property owner, which would make them significant trees. And then there would be a different process on removing them if they're considered significant trees. So, so I question, are these significant trees or street trees? But either way, they're still trees and they still have rights, and they've been around for many years, and they've produced a lot of good for the community. I'm just hearing that the property owner is having some concerns about their personal property, and some of that could be mitigated easily by the property owner hiring a contractor. So I'm not clear why this is even on the agenda. All right, thank you.
Thank you. And before we move on, Mr. Buck, now this issue has been raised twice for this item. I think it's pretty clear to me, but for the benefit of everybody, including myself, let's talk about that a significant tree in this respect. From my understanding, the property line is actually in the back behind the retaining wall, which essentially makes this garden a planter on the sidewalk. But where does this fall on this? Where are these significant trees or not? And are the significant trees only considered so if they're a certain size and behind the property line within, I believe, 15 feet? Could you clarify this, please?
Yes, absolutely. Chris Buck with Public Works. So street trees are any trees within the public right of way. And that's regardless of how much of that public right of way is paved. So we have protections for trees in the public right of way, and Public Works maintains all trees in the public right of way. The thing that can seem unusual for this site is that the property line is not where the retaining wall begins. The property line is actually 22 feet back from that curb. And so this is not unusual. Here's a great example. The Sunset or the Richmond, if you picture the land use out there, it has houses that are kind of set back quite a bit from the front sidewalk. And there's like these little, almost like front yards. And what's fascinating is we typically have like a 6 to 7 foot paved sidewalk, and then this other area that you just assume is a front yard. And so when neighborhoods were developed, it costs money to pave. So it's amazing that more things weren't paved over. But there are designated sidewalk widths for paving, but that's not where the real property line exists. So in this case, these trees are within a 22-foot wide public right of way. Public Works became responsible for them in 2017 with a passage of Prop E. And to clarify, to answer your question regarding significant trees are on private property, but within 10 feet of a public right of way. So it is true that in many cases, in other cases that our public has seen, it might only be a 6-foot public right of way, and these might qualify as significant trees. In this case, they're within the public right of way. So does that clarify it? I know it's a lot of discussion, but those are the.
Sense to me. Yeah. I think the concept of significant trees being behind property lines, but still making a purview of the department. That always causes some confusion. But another thing was a question was raised by I think Josh of the fact that this tree was maintained by DPW and then kind of maintained, left alone, and now we're back a year later and say, oh, we have to get rid of this. My understanding is the assessment of the tree is not necessarily done when the tree is maintained. Are these different crews, or does an inspector usually come along when the trees are maintained? How does it work?
Yeah, so again, our own tree crews and our own inspectors, we all, if we went down the street, the things that we would notice first are the trees in the sidewalk that we, without even having to question ourselves, assume we have responsible for. Then secondarily, we have to say, well, what is the width of the right of way? Are these trees in the setbacks within the public right of way? So that's, the first thing just to point out is, so we do have separate evaluations in advance of tree work. And I think, my feedback to that point would be, the public accuses us of being way too aggressive on removals, but I've heard several times today, why didn't we remove these if they were so bad? We don't want to remove everything that's out there that's causing issues. We don't. And these are two great examples of how we are not being too aggressive with removals. The current situation here is that both property owners could come after us for a claim for damage to their property. It's going to cost Public Works a lot more money than the cost of removal to reimburse these property owners for damage here. Now, our city attorney's office would say, well, that damage existed prior to us assuming liability. But I do want to point that out here. We have 2 trees in the public right of way that we theoretically need to use our $19 million to maintain. Do we want to maintain these 2 trees with our $19 million? I think we want to use that money elsewhere. So your question allowed me to slip a little rebuttal in there, but that's why we're not removing these trees. We're listening to the public. We only remove what we think is absolutely necessary. And we weren't, why would we remove these trees a year ago? We wouldn't. If the owners are fine with it and they want to hang out with these trees, great. But in this particular case, now that they've submitted an application, they've brought it to our attention and we have to address it. But we are not trying to remove trees aggressively,
Okay, that does answer my question.
Sure.
All right, thank you very much. Let's see, we have nobody else with their hands raised. Therefore, I will close this item, and with that, the hearing. Thank you very much for everybody for participating. I do apologize. I know I've taken you all beyond the regular lunchtime. So I thank you for sticking around. This hearing is now closed.